We're talking about the who is exempt from coming up for Korban Riyah, and we made a comparison to Hakel. And while we had done that, we talked about we went to talk about one thing which led to another, about a cheresh who can't hear was pater, and then a cheresh who can't hear in one ear, and then we went to talk about a Chagiga, a person who's lame in one foot, who is pater also from Korban Riyah. And the last thing we had learned was how do we know that pa'amim, it says a shalosh regalim, it says shalosh pa'amim, so both of them want to tell me that a person who is who is working on peg legs is exempt, even though they can walk. They're not walking on their own regel. And the other person is a Chagiga, a person who is a lame person, even a partial lame, is going to be excluded from bringing Korban Riyah. All these sound somewhat unfair.
How do you define lame?
A person is lame in one foot. Foot doesn't walk. He can't walk in the foot.
He walks.
He could hop on one foot.
He hops on one foot.
He would hop on one foot, right? Okay. I don't know. Like today, we see the person has a stroke nebuch, right? That probably a person would be considered lame.
Yeah, he's walking with,
right, schlepping a leg.
Schlepping a leg, yeah.
Right.
What if he favors a foot? That's
fine. If he favors a foot, he's weak on a foot, that's fine. But a person's a Chagiga, literally lame. You're obviously lame in both feet. You don't move.
Yeah.
If you're lame in one foot, it's also an exclusion. The same way that a person who can't hear in one ear, the same way a person can't see, still has the ability to see, but they're pater. But having said that, as a way to support that regel and pa'am are considered words for referring to foot, not just palm, which we always talk about time, right? In fact, the modern word hapa'amon, which is hapa'amon is a bell, or it's like a time bell. It's keeping time. Hapa'amon mitzalzel. So it's like I guess, I don't know.
School is a pa'amon of school.
Okay, but it really means however the bell is, right? But the term actually shouldn't say that. The word term pa'amon does come up in Tanakh. Pa'amon v'rimon were bells on the Kohen. So I'm incorrect in saying it's a modern term, but the term pa'am, which means bells, also has a connotation that the bell is used to keep time and to alert people and so forth.
So there's a park in Yerushalayim.
Correct. It's the reproduction of the Liberty Bell. Right. Which, by the way, we all forget that the bells that they used in the Revolutionary War were really church bells. Those are the big bells that they used. I mean, where else they get bells from? They wanted to call people to order. They brought out a cow's horn, or they brought out a bugle, right? So, but anyways. Okay.
They're in the big puzzle. There is a crack in it.
I know. So. But the truth is, it was, I believe, once they put that, like the bolt in, it was able to keep the
sound. In the States.
Yeah.
Yeah. The best they could do is the poor casting crack.
Is it that he can't go, or he doesn't have the obligation?
He doesn't have the obligation. So therefore, if he doesn't, he can go. He can't bring the Korban Riyah. He can't bring the sacrifice. He can go.
He can go.
Yeah, he can go. But the Korban Riyah, which really accompanies him, he surely can go. Yeah. Right? People should go on Rabbi today. Okay. Here you go. Anyway, so the pasuk they quote in two psukim. The second pasuk is the pasuk in Shir Hashirim, Mayafa pamayech banolim basnadev. How beautiful are the pamonim are your feet. This is, once again, there's a lot of I don't want to say sexual innuendo, but there's a lot of phrases in Shir Hashirim which talk about the body, right, and the lover. So how beautiful are your feet, banalim, in your shoes, bat nadiv, the daughter of the prince. Okay, so you see that is talking about palm is clearly referring to the foot, right, or the leg of the lover in Shir Hashirim. So having said that, Darash Rava. So here we are, where I don't know if people can find it. In the short lines of the Gemara, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 lines at the end, there's short lines in the Gemara. And there's a star, Darash Rava. The first word on line is Banalim Bat Nadiv. I'm not sure if Mr. Richter has it. Yes? Okay. So Darash Rava, Mai Dechsiv Mayafa Pamayach Banalim Bat Nadiv. what does the pasuk mean? And once again, Chazal understood Shir HaShirim to be a comparison or a mashal about the Almighty and the Jewish people, right? By the reading Shir HaShirim in general is very difficult. It's very difficult because it's hard to know who's speaking, right? And it doesn't have the he says, she says. Okay, so you can read it in any one of the different ways in terms of how the discussion is going on. But the key of Chazal's acceptance of Shir HaShirim was the fact that this was understood to be Kodesh Kodashim and referred to the relationship with the Almighty and Jewish people. So what does this mean by Kamayafa Pamayach Banolim Bat Nadiv? Kama Noim Raglim Sheisrael B'Shor Shalom Regel? How beautiful are the feet of the Jewish people when they go up to the Regel? No, it's not really talking about the lover, the woman, how beautiful is her legs. Rather, but it's talking about the legs of the Jewish people, how wonderful it is. Because that's the analogy. When they come up for the regel, the palm, Bat Nadiv. What do you mean, the daughter of the Nadiv of the prince? So says the Gemara, Bat Bito Shel Avram Avinu Shnikwa Nadiv. They are, or Knesset Yisrael is the daughter of Avram, who is considered a prince. Now, Shenemar. L'divei amim nesafu am Elokei Avraham. So Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak. So Tehillim refers to the Nidivei Amim. All the princes came together to say that they were the nation of this is the nation of the God of Avraham. So all the people are talking about the God of Abraham. Why? What about Isaac and Jacob? So the drash is Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak v'Yaakov, Elo Elokei Avram she'atchila lagerim. Avram was the first of the converts. Now, what does that really mean? What do you mean Avram was the first of the converts? Why would Avram be the first of the converts?
He converted.
So he converted. There was no one for him to follow. Now, as difficult as it is to be a convert, you're following a path that others have taken. And you're joining a group that's been accepted and set. There isn't a real convert that doesn't convert who is not impressed with what the Jewish people stand for, or they right. There's a relationship. But besides that, a real ger wants to become part of the Jewish people because of the values. We have gerim in our community.
To be the first is always difficult.
Right. And who's he going to follow? He's blazing a path unto himself. He was separating from everyone else. So therefore, when the nations are now coming to say that we are really impressed with that you are the nation of Abraham, it's because they're saying that we want to join and recognize the greatness of God, of the Almighty. And therefore, in the Divei Amim Nesaf, we came together to say, Am Elokei Avraham. These are the people of Avraham, who is the who was the first of the Gabriel.
What about Shem and Eber?
I don't know, but they don't have the same concept of really joining the Jewish people. It's like a concept, but besides, the Torah doesn't really identify them. There's this mythical yeshiva of Shem and Eber. We don't know that much about them.
Say Yaakov went there or something, right?
Yeah, but it's a medrash. It's hard to know who they are. The shame that we know is the shame of the son of Noah.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's anything that we know about this mysterious yeshiva where Yaakov went and other people went, right? Is based upon midrashim. But we know that Avram is the one who gets up and says, "I believe in a God." It's not just midrashim. Hashem says when he says, "I have to tell Avraham before I destroy stone, because he kept mitzvosai, chukosai, v'torah, he kept my mitzvot." Whatever it is, whether Avram keeps all the mitzvos or some of the mitzvos, he surely keeps bris milah. Right? So he's the first person to kind of stand out differently. And he kind of moves to Eretz Yisrael. That's pretty significant.
There was no bris milah before him, was there?
Not that we know of, no. This is a very serious operation. This stands out.
Yeah.
In the ancient world, without anesthetics, and without medications, without sterile conditions, this is tremendous going on.
Age, right?
At his age, for anyone.
Flint would use a flint.
Correct.
I mean,
there's no surgical steel. There's no aseptic conditions. There's no medications.
Very little.
Well, they're herbal medications they had. Okay. So at any rate, this was the drash. It's kind of like the drash comes around. we quote the pasuk before to say that you see this refers to a feet of the Bat Nadiv, and now we say, guess what? It really refers to the Jewish people going on Aliyah Regal. So it's just a kind of flip side of the whole drush itself. Why is this brought to support that? Now, the Gemara goes from one drush to another drush, and the connection here is because we had a number of statements of Rav Tanchum about a person who can only hear in one ear, or can't hear in one ear, a person who's lame in one foot. So the Gemara now mentions something else in the name of Rav Tanchum, okay, which is Nagada, a very famous Nagada, which I'm sure you all know. Darish Rav Nosson Bar Minyunim Mishum Rav Tanchum, Ma'idich Siv Yabor Reik Ein Bo Mayim. So when Yosef is put in the pit, so the pasuk says he's put in, he's put in there. There's no water. So it's the terminology doesn't have to tell us there's no water, says the Gemara, because Mimash Mishnema Vabor Reik Ein Yodea Shein Bo Mayim. So don't I know that it's empty? El Mayim Ein or Mayim Ayin Ein Bo Am Nachashim Yakrabim Yesh Bo. In other words, there was actually snakes and scorpions in the pit itself. Now, there's a very famous medrash, which really means that the brothers intended, or either they intended or they didn't realize how dangerous the situation they had created, that Yosef could have died in the very pit. The pit doesn't become there for a holding pit, it becomes a miracle that Yosef escapes. Now, the drush is based upon the fact this is Borek, and where else would you, in the middle of the wilderness, you're not going to find water in the bar. Simple pshat is, the bar was empty. This was a cistern that was used to collect water during the runoff, and therefore it was empty and could be used as a holding pit. Or in fact, it could have been the other way around, that they put him in there and there was no danger of his drowning because the pit was empty. The drush is pum fakir, that it was empty and there was no water, but it means there was something else. Now, of course, the question that a lot of the Rishonim ask is, if it's really empty, right?
What are the scorpions?
So what are the scorpions and snakes doing in there? It's no longer empty. And the answer is that these kinds of chayas, or I guess from these kind of animals, hide in the cracks and crevices. In other words, you couldn't say there's a polar bear inside. You couldn't say there's a grizzly, there's a lion, and it wouldn't be empty. But these are the kinds of things that actually can come out.
Looks empty.
Because it looks empty, because it is empty, because they're living within the burrows or within the cracks and crevices where they're actually staying. Okay?
But if they lived in the country, they would know they grew up there, they would know there's snakes. They know that.
So apparently it means that this was a notoriously dangerous pit for snakes. And, I mean, not every pit necessarily may have had snakes and scorpions.
Maybe, okay.
In other words, that the danger was very real, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu saves Yosef from this danger.
How long was he there, actually? Do you know?
How long is he there? I don't know. Till the different merchants come by.
I mean, it was more than one day.
I don't know. I don't think so.
No?
I don't know. That's not important. The point is, scorpions aren't pleasant.
Yeah.
And neither snakes. Okay? But the point of it being, because they are there, they cannot see, and therefore it's still considered, it is still considered borei. So, now, Tana Rabbanan. Okay, a little more Gadato. Does everybody remember the story about where Rabbi Gamliel was deposed and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was put in his place? Where it goes back with Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua refused to accept that the Yontif, or the calculations, I think, of Rabbi Gamliel.
And Kippur, come with me.
Correct.
Come with me.
Right. So there was a revolt. There really was a bit of a revolt from what happened, and because of this, eventually Rabbi Gamliel was, I guess, deposed would be the nice way to say it. And when he was deposed, they replaced Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah in his place because he was a neutral party. And but when they put Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah in his place, people were not very happy because Rabbi Yeshua was deposed. Rabbi Yeshua was deposed. Now Rabbi Gamliel is deposed. And who is this Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? So the Medrash says he was a youngster. He was 18 years old. So it says he became white overnight. And that's why in the Haggadah it says Harei ani kiven shivim shana. Okay, so this is actually a very important story. It's a story in Brachas, in the beginning of Brachas, Daf Chav Zayin Chav Ches, when Rabbi Yeshua disagreed with Rabbi Gamliel, and Rabbi Gamliel censured Rabbi Yeshua for arguing, and they put Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah in the place itself. But so they what they tried to, and once Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was there, they wanted to try to undo this. They said they can't remove Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah because Malam Kodesh Ve'im Moridim. Once they made him the Rosh Yeshiva, they can't depose him. So they came up with a compromise that they had two heads of the yeshiva, and I don't remember, it was 3 and 1 or 2 and 2, but there was an alternation in alternating weeks whether Rabbi Gamliel would darshan or whether Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah would darshan. Okay. Now it's important that you understand this because the people who we're going to see in the story are really part in this piece of Agadata are really the figures that occur. You're going to see Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and this story of the story that comes afterwards. Yeah, it's this story, okay? And it's and others are going to appear, including Rabbi Yeshua himself. Rabbi Yeshua was the one who was censured by Rabbi Gamliel. Okay. So Ma'aseh Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, Rabbi Elazar ben Chasma, Shaholchu lahakbel pnei Rabbi Yeshua bepkiyin. So these are students, younger Talmidei Chachamim, go see Rabbi Yeshua. This is the famous Rabbi Yeshua who was censured by Rabbi Gamliel, same guy, and he's in the Pekin. So Amar Lahem, so Rabbi Yeshua said to them, Ma chidush haya b'Beit HaMedrash hayom? What chidush was in the Beis Medrash? You always see that Rabbi Yeshua refused to go back to the Beis Medrash. That's what some of them Rishonim say. Why did he ask what's going on? Why didn't he go himself? Because after this whole baloo where they kind of basically, he was like censured and almost, I guess, put in cherem by Rabbi Gamliel, he refused to go back. So he says, keep me in the loop. So Amalo, so they said, Talmidecha anu, u'mimecha anu shosim. We're your students, and we drink your waters. What are you asking us about the Beis Medrash? So Amalahem afapi kain if shalabeit medrash below chiddush. She says, "We're your students. Well, what's important for us is what you're saying, not what was in the Beis Medrash where you're not at." He says, "No, I still really want to know what happened in the Beis Medrash." So, and they say, "Shabbos shemi haisa." Whose Shabbos was it? Who was giving the drash that week? Was it Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah or was it Rabbi Gamliel? So they say Shabbos Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah haisa. So it was the Shabbos of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. And Ubameh Haita Haggadah Hayom. And what was the Haggadah that was being darshan that day? I guess the drash had a halachic context and an Haggadah context. If you see the old style of Shabbos Haggadah and Shabbos Shuvah drashas, and I remember Rav Kerzner used to give the drush just like this. The first part of the drush was a halachic insight, some great chiddush and iyun and this and that. And then the second half of the shir would be Agada. So, if you couldn't follow the first half, you came back to the second half. There are different styles. The more modern rabbis use different styles, but usually had these two pieces. So the drash had these components. They said, well, what was the Agada to? The halacha we don't need to talk about. So Amrlo, so the students say to Rabbi Yeshua, but Parshas Hakel. Who's talking about Parshas Hakel? Umad Darashba, and what did he darshan about Parshas Hakel? So they said, and this is what the drash we had mentioned, I think last week, about the men and the women coming for Hakel. Once again, this has nothing really to do with Chagiga. It's brought here because we've got a piece of Agadata, different Agadic pieces, and one of the comparisons before was to compare Olas Riyah to Hakel. So they got this Agadata that brings them both together. So what does it say? Hakel sa'am ha'nashim v'nashim v'tam. So this is what Moshe says: bring the people together, anashim, men, women, and kids. And anashim ba'im lilmod, nashim ba'as l'shmoa. If men come to learn, women come to listen. Now, what does that mean? Are the women not coming to learn? So the Mefarshim understand the mitzvah of Vishinantam. I'm going to be very careful how we say this to the modern audience. The mitzvah of Vishinantam Levanecha is a mitzvah to teach males, right? And in fact, as you know, before the Beis Yaakov movement, before Sarah Schneer came along and developed the Beis Yaakov movement, girls were not educated, right? And then there was a recognition that in the modern societies 100 years ago, they had to educate the girls or they'd be lost completely in the modern world.
What changed at that time?
What changed? Modernity. The Jews were now accepted as in different areas, and they became coming to mix with general cultures, secular cultures. If the girls didn't know what happened in Chumash, Right, that's what happens. But having said that, there's still a difference. Whereas the men were taught really to become intellectual, insightful, Gemara discussions, Shak Levataria, the women were taught what they really needed to know. I want to be very careful how I say that, but that's how Sira Shnira really started. So much so,
like davening and
not just davening, and how to make the chicken, and how to kasher the chicken, and the halachas here, and the kashrus, and this, what happened, the practical kind of stuff. They needed to know halachas. And now the Chumash and Tanakh becomes very minimal.
Oh,
okay. So much so that the Sat Jul has a tshuva that in his schools they shouldn't be teaching the girls Chumash and Rashi, just Chumash. Those they came l'shmoa, they came to learn. Rashi is already with his drash and his things and then so forth. Okay, now the reality is, in our modern world, we want to take it a step forward. In our modern world, if you don't excite the girls intellectually, you've lost the battle. It's no longer about how to salt the chicken. And as a matter of fact, as you may know, Rav Soloveitchik Zechar believed that girls should study Gemara. And he writes, he was asked this question, must be the 50s or 60s, and he wrote, he says, today, if you want to keep them as part of society, you got to teach them, you have to involve them in Gemara. Maybe not the Gemara that they're learning on the highest level of the yeshiva, but you have to get involved in the same way the guys are learning it. And he believed that girls could learn Gemara. He's very strong about that, because without that, you're losing it. But the basic point of what's going on here is the men are coming to learn and to study. And to study means that you have intellectual prowess to probe. The women are coming to learn basic things, which makes sense. Okay, there's a chiyuv, they have to know what's going on. And the taf, says the Gemara, the taf lama bayin. So why are the kids being brought here? So we know where the men are coming. We know the women are coming. Why are they bringing the kids? So Gemara says, in order to give the schar to those who are to those who are going to bring them. Okay. So this is what they told. This is what they told Rabbi Yeshua. And what does Rabbi Yeshua say? Amalahem. Margolis tova hoisa biyetchem uvikashtem la'abdom imeni. You had a great pearl, a great jewel. You wanted to keep it to yourself. Notice I asked you what it was, and you said, "Nah, we learned from you. We didn't learn anything. There's nothing going on." It says it's the greatest thing in the world. So some of the darshanim, in trying to connect this story to the story of the Rabbi Shimon, the Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and the Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua story, which in brachas say that this is not simply a random sequence of what happened or what was. Otherwise, it wouldn't be recorded. You don't have every conversation that's mentioned. What they're really saying to them is when they came to visit Rabbi Yeshua, these Talmidim, they came really to convince him to return to the Beis Medrash. It wasn't simply a random that they're going to visit him, they haven't seen him for a while, how's he doing? They actually came because Rabbi Yeshua was not coming to the Beis Medrash because of the machloka still. They came to tell him that they should come nonetheless, and they came to relate to him these teachings, right? And you see we'll have more drashas that they learn. They came to teach him that the taf was brought for the mitzvah of Hakel, even though the taf didn't learn anything. In other words, that even if Rabbi Yeshua would not learn anything from the drashas in the Beis Medrash, he should still come to the Beis Medrash because you get a schar just for coming, even if you don't learn anything. It's a great drash on this. A great drash on this drash. Why'd you bring the top? The top didn't learn anything. They're babies, but you can still have an importance with someone's going to come. Okay.
But he would know that himself.
He was, in other words, in light of what happened, I'm sure you have once upon a time seen Broigus in a shul.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a high level person.
The highlight of
it's a high person.
Highlight of Shabbos.
Highlight of a shul. Okay. This was a major Broigus by the great scholars of that generation.
Seems like his ego got in the way of this thing.
Well, what really got in the way was the fact that there's one leader. You have to accept the leader. And sometimes the leader can be compassionate and open, but if you cross that leader and you create a danger to that authority, it's very difficult. It's like crossing a mother bear, right? So that's the first part of it. Now, So the Odarash, he said Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah also darshan on this drush of his. He had one other thing to say. It's Hashem Hamarto Hayom, v'Hashem Hamircho Hayom. That you talked about Hashem today, and Hashem really talked about you. Okay, so and which means this is a pasuk in the end of Dvarim. I think it's Nitzavim Vayelech, or maybe it's Kisete. So Amalama Kadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. So Hashem says to Jewish people, Atem asisani chativa achas bolam. You made me one banner, or one person, or one group. You've made me accepted. V'ani asel etchem chativa achat bolam. And I'll make you one outstanding group in this world. You mentioning me, and I'm mentioning you. Atem asitani chativa achas bolam. You made me stand out. So how did you do that? Because you've said Jewish people say this. And I'll make you one group, or one shevach, one praise to you, because I will say Mikam Yisrael Goyechad Ba'aretz. Okay, so in other words, this is another thing that Rav Elazar ben Azariah said that day. And once again, the theme of this saying to Rabbi Yeshua also may not be random. The saying to Rabbi Yeshua, you see the Jewish people come together. They come together to serve Hashem. Whatever the differences are, they all say together, Shema Yisrael Hashem Echad. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu praises the Jewish people that Mikam Yisrael Goy Echad. So they're stressing the concept of unity in terms of coming together. So that also may fits in the whole trying to understand this not as simply a random sequence of events, but as a way to come and give a little musar, not musar, but try to talk Rabbi Yeshua to come back to the base medrash, to forgive what happened and to come back. After all, Rabbi Gamliel was no longer the singular authority. And then there's one more part. V'afu pasach v'darash, and he, in other words, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, also opened up in darshan. In other words, pasach v'darash means usually before there's a long halachic piece, they would open up with a nagada. So this may be the third opening that he had. He said as follows. He quoted the pasuk from Koheles. Divrei chachamim kedarbonos. The words of the chachamim. Koheles is always very strict and very serious. The words of the scholars are like the goad, the stick that pushes the animals, right? Ukamas meros, and they're like nails, and the tuim which are planted bale asufos, by the people who come together in groups. It really doesn't make sense. The pasuk not numero echad, which were given from one shepherd. So when Koheles is talking here, he's talking about the Torah. So lama nimshlo divrei Torah ledarbon. So why is Koheles talking about the Torah and referring it to a driving stick for the animals? Lomar mar darbon zeh mechaven et aparad letlameha lotziach chaim lolam. Same way this driving stick drives the ox to go to the furrow, the trough, the furrow, to be able to fructify the land, to be able to plow the land, which will bring life to the world. So the purpose of this is to guide the cow, the ox, to make the land be fruitful. So after the Torah, so the words of the Torah also direct us from death to the ways of life. Okay, that's the first part. The same. Now, if on the other hand, the way that this goad can be taken away, it's movable, so you can be here today and gone tomorrow. It's not permanent. You use the goad. It's probably not. You probably have to replace the goad after a while, the stick after a while. So avdivrei Torah mitaltlim. So maybe you think also Torah is only temporary. It's got to be replaced at one point. So Talmud lomar masmeros. So it talks about masmeros. It talks about nails. Nails are a sense of permanence. Nails were made of iron. They're not going to wear out. Something of wood, a stick of wood, can break, can wear out, can be destroyed. An iron nail is going to stick and be there forever. It's going to direct and help and build and connect. On the other hand, ima masmer zeh chaser v'lo yaser, the same way that the iron. Now some of the Rishonim have a girsa mechaser, not chaser. When you knock a nail into the wood, what do? You are removing, you're really removing the air spaces of cellulose in the wood. But what you're doing is you're pressing the wood, but you're making a hole into where the wood is. So Chazal understand this as if to say there's less wood. It's really not true. There's less mass of wood. It's not true. There is the same mass of wood, but there is because it's being pushed.
You're just compressing it. You're ripping it and compressing it.
You're compressing it, right? But it looks like there's less wood. The same way that the masmer makes things less and not more. So therefore, divrei Torah chasem v'leisem. So maybe the Torah becomes less and doesn't make more. Maybe the Torah once again, if you say it's not going to be completely not permanent, maybe it's only partially not permanent. So therefore, the pasuk says it's kamasmeros netuim, they are nails which are planted in. Now the simple pshat is when you plant the nail in, you bang it in so hard that it's firmly planted. But the fact that it's using the term natia means it's a sign of life. The sif to say the nail is being nailed in as a sign of life. It's not really true. Nail, of course, is simply iron. What's the sign of life? The comparison is because the Torah, man netiyazu para preyove, the same way that anything that you plant, like a tree, like a plant, will grow, is going to multiply. After Torah parm v'ravim. So the Torah will multiply, will make you more and better. It's not going to make you less. It's not destructive. It's actually positive. It's growing. It's fructifying. It's helping. And then the pasuk continues, Bale asufos. These are nails that are put in by those who are sitting in the groups. Bale asufos. Elo talmidei chachamim shiyoshim asufos asufos. These are the scholars who are sitting in an asifa, together, and gathered together. What are they doing? They're learning b'chavrusa. They're learning in small groups, chaburos. V'yoskim b'Torah. Halala mitamim. They're learning Torah. And how do they learn Torah? How does learning go on? So the answer, learning goes on when people argue one way or the other. You say this is right, and you say this is what means. I say no, means something else. This is didactic. That's how intellectual discovery takes place. If everybody's going to sit and nod their heads, right? So therefore, they're sitting in groups, and how the Talmidei Chachamim learning? Halala mitamim v'halala mitarim. These people say tameh, these people say tar. Right? One scholar says this, one scholar says that. Halala osim v'halala matirim. This group of scholars says also. This group says mutar. Halala posim v'halala machshirim. These say pasul, these say kosher. Right? It's a back and forth. So the whole pasuk is really referring to scholarship, and it looks like, how can this possibly work? Right? What kind of scholarship comes out? Half of them say it's black, and half of them say it's white. Right? Half of them say mutter, half say aser. Shema yomer adam hechani lamed Torah me'ata. How can I learn Torah from this confusion? Talmud lomar kulam natnu me'roa echad. They all came from one shepherd. Kel echad netanam. One God gave them. Parnas echad amaran. One leader, means the Almighty, gave them, or said them. Maybe it means Moshe said them over. Mipi adon kol amasim baruchu. From the owner of all things, blessed be He. Dichsiv vaydaber Elokim es kol hadvarim ha'eleh. So they all came from one God. They're all the pros and cons, all the machloksim, which look to be diametrically opposed, are different shades of the same different hues of the same color. They look like they're opposites. They look like they come from opposing viewpoints, but really not true. They actually can be reconciled. How you can reconcile them, I don't know. Right? But no, somewhere there's something that can put them together, and therefore when you say how can I learn? How can I make sense of this? Looks like a mishmash. It looks like war. Right? Afato asay oznacha ke'afar chesed uknei lecha leiv mevin. You make your ear like an afar chesed it's like a hopper that they would put the grain in. So the grain would go in and go down, and it was wide and came on the bottom and would come into the millstone. Like a funnel, like a big funnel, so you could pour the grain in without spilling it. But it means basically that you're accepting everything. And then it's not exactly true that it's like the funnel, but it means that you're able to filter out, to make sense of it all in one way so that it comes out in one stream. It looks like a cacophony, but really it's a melody that's all playing together. So, and Knei L'cha Leiv Mevin, and therefore acquire a heart that understands, L'shmos Divrei Metamim, Ves Divrei Metarim, those who say Tameh, those who say Tahar, Divrei Osim, Divrei Matirim, the ones say Arsa, the ones say Mutar, Divrei Poslim, Divrei Machshirim, B'lashon hazeh, in this way, so that you're able in one way to make sense out of all of them. So once again, along the understanding that this is not simply a random sequence of discussions, that these Talmidim are telling Rabbi Yeshua that he should come back to the Beis Medrash. What does this really mean? What are they really saying to him? You can have varying viewpoints, and you're not out of the ballpark. Right? Okay, so yes, you had one opinion, and Rabbi Gula had another opinion, and you were censored, and you're broigus, and you're upset. But that's what Torah is. Torah is all about different opinions, and sometimes this one wins, sometimes that one wins, but that doesn't really negate the sense of what Torah is.
In Sanhedrin, based in all, says the person's chayav, person walks.
Correct. So when you deal with
a person has to have at least one
correct,
the discerning viewpoint. Obviously it doesn't, to our intellect, make sense, but in the Torah there's a reason why.
Correct. And there are different shittot that we've learned, and you study halach, and you see that the Mishnah Berurah comes and says we paskin like this, but there obviously where people did things differently. So what does that mean? The answer is there are different ways of looking at things. There's different minhagim, different understandings. But look, what does it mean? Beis Shammai was all wrong. Beis Shammai loses in 95% of the cases. Right, 97% of the cases, Beis Shammai is the loser. What does that mean? With Beis Shammai, you think they changed their mind? Right, Elo Devil Kimachayim. Correct. So and in fact the Gemara says that Lo Nimnu Beit Shammai Beit Hillel to intermarry one with each other. So what does that mean? I don't know. So which halacha did they follow in the house? Or were they careful to make sure that no one was offended? But they found a way. Look, there are clearly some very opposing machloks in between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, not just in terms of Issa v'Heter, but also in terms of Kedushin and Gerushin. So, but it means that that's the Torah. The Torah is multifaceted, and every machloket that you see becomes really a part. It's coming from the same the same source. So they were saying to him basically, look, if you think that we didn't convince you with the first two reasons why you should come back to the Beis Medrash. The first one was about even if you don't learn, come like the Taf. And the second one was about the unity of the Jewish people. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Echad and Mikam Chesed Goy Echad. Then come back, because you can still have differing opinions, variant opinions, and still be accepted within the Beis Medrash. So, and okay. So and this, by the way, may be why when they come to him and he says, "What did you learn in the Beis Medrash today?" They were very hesitant. They didn't want to seem respectful. They had a message to give, but they wanted the message to be sure that Rabbi Yeshua understood that it was coming from he had instigated they would bring the message. They wanted to show their fidelity to Rabbi Yeshua before they brought this message that really is meant to be, giving Musar in a certain way to Rabbi Yeshua. I mean, it's a very interesting mahalach to really make sense of this whole piece of Haggadah. Because otherwise, why is this piece put in here? I mean, it's very nice that this occurs, and it's nice to have this piece here, and Hakel Asa'am. But it's a long excursus from where we had talked about things before. Okay. Okay, now we have a variation on the story, or not a variation, a corollary on the story. We got one more piece, one line here. So Amar Lahem, so Rabbi Yeshua said to them, Ein dor yosam sh'Rav Elazar ben Azariah shoroi b'tocho. The generation that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah lives in can't be an orphan generation. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is there, which, by the way, is Rabbi Yeshua's shtoch about, because he doesn't mention Ram Gamliel, of course. He says if Yeshua ben Azariah was put in place, maybe I'd come back. But he's only there half the time. So that's the end of this story. Now, the Gemara brings an opposing story about where people presented something in the Beis Medrash which was maybe not said as hesitantly as the first case was. Okay. Okay. Now, okay, the lame will behedja. And now the Gemara says, so why when the students went to see Rabbi Shul, why didn't they tell him right away what it was? So I gave you like the drash behind it, but the Gemara gives a much more simpler answer. It says Mishum Maishis Shahaya, because it was a case where students were asked, or a student was asked, well, what happened in the Beis Medrash? And he wasn't so hesitantly, and you'll see what happened. There was a bit of a punishment that happened here. Okay. So, Maiseb the Tanya. Maiseb Rabbi Yossi Bar Durmaskis Shahalach Lahakbel Pnei Rabbi Lazar Balud. Okay. By the way, maybe Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Eliezer. It's not clear from the schos, and it's possible this is also the same time period that we're talking about. So Amar he said to him, Ma Chiddush Haya b'Beit Medrash Hayom. What Chiddush was in the Beis Medrash today? So Amalei Nimnu V'Gamru. Okay. He said Nimnu V'Gamru. They decided, they took a vote and they decided Ammon and Moab Ma'aser Ma'aser Ani B'Shvius. Okay, so let me tell you what the halacha is, and also to say that it's possible the story is connected to the previous story, because it's possible that, especially with Rabbi Eliezer, as some of the scholars says, it may be the same time and the same thing where he didn't perhaps come to the Beis Medrash. So he said what they learned in Beis Medrash. He said they took a vote that the lands of Ammon and Moab were on Shemitah. They still gave Meiser Ani. In other words, normally on the Shemitah year, there is no Trumos and there's no Meisos, because everything is Hefker, right? There are certain lands that they made a takana that were not considered Hefker. This looks like the lands of Ammon and Moab. It's not clear if this is an Aver Hayardain, or these were lands of Ammon and Moab that may have actually been on the west bank of the Jordan River.
So Shemitah doesn't apply.
So the laws of Shemitah do apply, but some of the laws don't apply. So now, in other words, it looks like they're saying that what you was growing was being set aside for the Aniyim. It doesn't talk about the Chayav to give Truma. It doesn't talk about the Chayav Meiser Rishon. It says whatever grew they had to set aside as Meiser Ani. So it's a very funny kind of thing, and it looks like this is a very late takana. It says Nimnu V'Gamru. Nimnu means they took a vote, they learned and they took a vote and they decided this. So what they had until now. What does that mean? What they do? So this looks like something that may have been something new or was decided new. So what happened? So who's responding to? Rabbi Yossi Bar Durkamis is responding to Rabbi Lazar. Once again, he does not show the sign of respect that the previous story talks about. It may be a similar kind of thing. The Rabbi Eliezer did not come to the Beis Medrash in light of this fight with Rabbi Gamliel. This is really kind of going on the limb. This may or may not be true, but basically you'll see that the Rabbi Yossi Bar Durkamis misses the boat because he doesn't really recognize how much Rabbi Eliezer really knows and how great he was. So he says to him, so who says to him? So Rabbi Eliezer says to him, Amalo, Yossi, pshot yodecha v'kabel anecha. It literally means put your hands out and your eyes will pop into them, okay? Basically means put your hands out, accept what I'm going to give to you, and your sight will be taken away from you. It doesn't mean physically like it's a cartoon where the eyes pop out, okay? So he's being punished for something that happened here. So sure enough, Pashad Yadav v'kibel einav. He put his hands out and he became blind. So Bacha Rabbi Lazar v'Amar. So Rabbi Lazar, who did this, who punished his student Rabbi Yossi Bar Dukamis, cried and said, "So the Hashem lireyav ubriso lahodiam," that the secret of Hashem is to those who fear Him, and his covenant is to those who He tells lodiam. So, in other words, what did you do wrong? Right, something happened here. It's not clear what exactly he did wrong. So he said to him, this already was decided. Amalo lech emar lahem al tachushu leminyanchem. Says, don't be concerned about this this decision that you made, your vote that you took. Your vote is worthless. Kach mekublani Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai. This is the tradition I got from Yochanan ben Zakkai. Sheshama me Rabbo v'Rabbo me Rabbo, who I got from his teacher and his teacher and his teacher. The Hilchos LaMoshe Misinai. This is a halacha LaMoshe Misinai, which by the way the Rishonim say does not literally mean halacha LaMoshe Misinai because it's a takana. But it means it's a very, very early takana. It's not a takana that happens in the wake of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash and the generations afterwards. This goes back before Rav Yochanan Zakkai, many generations, when there was a Beis Hamikdash. And they decided that Amon Moav Ma'asim Meiser Ani B'Shvius, that they made this decision many, many years before. So, in other words, it's like almost like putting him in cherem. So the question is really, what's the punishment for? What did he do wrong? So there are a number of choices within the Rishonim. One is that because he's Rabbi Yossi Bar Dukamis is ascribing this to the Chachamim in Yavne, when really it's much earlier. If you don't realize that earlier takanos were made, you think something suddenly is brand new. That's against the Masorah, the beauty or the importance of the Masorah. The second thing he did wrong is he didn't have the kavod response. Right, and those are basically to the two responses. In other words, he didn't say Talmid Cha'ani, and I learned from you, or just the whole attitude was one that had a lack of kavod. So either it's because of lack of understanding of the Masorah, or because of this sense of lack of kavod in terms of dealing with his teacher. So, and why is this? Matam, what's the reason why this takana was made? He tells them, he says, you little whippersnapper, you came to tell me what was in the Beis Medrash. I know this more than anyone else. This goes back generations. You're coming to castigate me for not being in the Beis Medrash, right? This, if you assume the same thing, you're kind of giving me mussar to come to the Beis Medrash. And in reality, I know it's what the Beis Medrash was because we learned this. We had a Masorah that goes back generations after generations. So what's the reason for it? So he says that there was certain when there's kedusha rishon and kedusha shniya. When the Jewish people come up to sanctify Eretz Yisrael, so the land is sanctified. When they leave and they come back to re-sanctify, can take control of it. And I think the area is actually smaller than what it initially was. So the question is, they say some parts where they said they left did not give it complete kedusha. Said Matam Harbe Krachim Kavshu Oli Mitzrayim Lo Kavshim Oli Bavel. There were many cities that were taken over and conquered by those who came out of Mitzrayim. This is the Jews who came there to Yisrael, and were not reconquered. Why did that never conquer? And when they didn't reconquer it, they didn't reconquer it with kedusha for a purpose. They didn't mean reconquer it. They didn't invest it with the kedusha of Eretz Yisrael.
That's on purpose? On
purpose. Because the first kedusha of Eretz Yisrael was removed when they were exiled, and they had to reinvest it. And they kept these cities. They kept these cities unsanctified. That they would have, poor people would have a place to find food on Shemitah. So that there was always going to be, everyone is grabbing the food for Shemitah. The poor people are put at a disadvantage. They may not have the assets to hire people to collect for them. So therefore they said there's always going to be some places where you can find Meiser Ani that you have to give to the poor person, that he will have it. So no, it's almost saying that really this is not just a takana, this goes back to how the land was re-sanctified. They left certain pockets as Jewish land, but unsanctified. What does it mean as Jewish land that's unsanctified? Specifically for the laws of Maiserani. Okay.
Is it on the east side of the Jordan already?
So the Rishonim seem to say that this is really on the left side, the west side of what is Israel proper, what we call today the West Bank, or I'm going to say the West Bank, what we call Eretz Yisrael proper today. And there were certain things that were left that were not sanctified fully for that.
We don't know what those are.
We don't know what those are. We don't know what those are.
So if they didn't have that area, that wouldn't be enough for these people to eat. They couldn't do somewhere another place.
It might not be.
So there may not have been. Okay, so I think there's places in the very north where Ammon and Moab lived.
Is Ammon and Moab?
Or maybe so. I'm sorry?
Ammon, Moab?
Ammon and Moab was on the east bank.
The east bank,
But there were certain places where they may have been actually in the south, where Ammon and Moab may have moved over as well.
Mm.
It's not clear where this is. So once again, some other discussions on which side of the Jordan we're talking about. Right?
So what would they have to do to make it sanctified? What should
They with the decisions were what they would call, they would say we're going to leave this as a pocket that's a pocket of unsanctified land. So it's
Isn't it specifically mentioned in the Chumash that we will not have part of the land of Ammon and Moab because they got it as a Nahala for themselves?
so that may be on the east side of the Jordan.
Oh, okay.
So Tosfos tries to deal with this. I'm not understanding Tosfos fully. He's trying to say this is land that was not really conquered by Sichon. This was other kinds of land that they had. This is not part of that. That's why they said maybe Ammon and Moab land is actually on the west bank of the Jordan River. Okay, but in other words, it almost seems to say, but here's the key, that it didn't just happen in Yavneh, it happened many generations, and if you accept the tradition of Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Eliezer, then it happens when they come to reconquer the land. Okay? So he gives them, so he tells them back, in other words, you're telling me I should be in the Beis Medrash, right? I know more, right? And
he knows better.
I know you're trying to tell me I should come back. I know more than the Beis Medrash. Okay, so but it's clearly not halacha Moshe Sinai. That's for sure. It means a very old halacha. So and then the Gemara ends off the story. Tana lachash nidyash v'daito. After he settled down, after Rav Elazar was able to tell a student what actually happened, Amar Yehiratzon Shiachzru Einei Yotzi Lemkomon, that his eyes should return to the place, means the eyesight should return, and v'chazu, and of course he became cured, and his eyesight was restored. So that becomes the unusual conclusion to this whole long excursus of Agadata, which takes us, by the way, to a good place to stop, because the next piece talks about a brand new topic, which is about how do we define what a shota is. Okay? How do you define a shota for bringing karma chagiga, and the question whether that would be the same kind of definition for other things as well.